said, this research was conducted as part of my master's, supervised by Dr. Rachel Talbot, and today's talk is focused specifically on the casting of these roles. So a trouser role is one in which a female performer undertakes a male character. The pageboy is one of two main types of trouser role in the operatic repertoire, the other being the heroic travesty of the Baroque and bel canto Italian tradition. Principally found in French opera, pageboy roles proliferated during the mid-19th century and became sort of stock secondary characters that would serve to lighten the opera. Either they would have comedic subplots or they would provide comedic commentary on the main action. The pageboy is charming, jovial and often sex-obsessed. If, as Peter Davids points out, they are slightly formulaic. As Davids writes, if Stefano seems vaguely familiar, that's because we've already met a boy very much like him in Faust, where his name was Emil. My research uncovered several musical tropes, including the use of sound effect music and what I dubbed the tra-la-la aria, which became associated with the pageboy throughout the 19th century. These tropes often further establish the character's theatrical and comedic qualities. Since pageboys are very much stock characters with a stock musical style, think light, bright and chirpy, it follows that their roles place similar vocal requirements on their performers. The majority of these roles are written for wide-ranging voices, with extremes in range often exploited for comedic effect. Crucially, the tessitura, where the role sits vocally, is often high. While many roles do require some agility, though not so much as to rival the lead soprano, it is the performer's charm and charisma that's principally on display. The orchestral texture is usually scaled back, suggesting that composers envisioned lighter voice types taking these roles. Given the character's generally sunny dispositions, one imagined that brighter vocal timbres are best suited to these parts. It seems surprising, therefore, that these roles today are almost universally sung by mezzo-sopranos. The profile of the mezzo-soprano voice as darker, richer and lower tessitura than her soprano colleagues seems in stark contrast to the actual vocal requirements of pageboy roles. To address this contradiction, I created a database of trouser roles which detail libretto language, performance year, designated voice type in the score, and the names of the original singers. Mezzo-sopranos represent only 16% of roles in this database, suggesting that current casting is out of step with historical practice. This raises the question, who did composers write these roles for? The careers of singers who created these roles provide useful insight when answering this question. Opera's first pageboy, Cherubino, in Mozart's Le Nozze di Figaro, was created by Dorothea Busani. Of her singing, a contemporary wrote that he had never heard such a beautiful and charming chest voice, nor one used with so much humour and so mischievously. It's worth noting that Busani also created in Despina in Così fan tutti, a role described in a Glyndebourne programme as the lightest soprano on stage. This therefore suggests that the archetypal pageboy voice is that of a light soprano, or as we might term soubrette, with a good command of the chest register. Dugazon is a term commonly found in biographies of pageboy performers, as well as in the dramatis personae of operas. Named after Madame Dugazon, Dugazon parts fell to singers with light voices, who specialised in charming, coquettish, quick-witted characters. While the term has fallen out of modern use, it seems to essentially be a synonym for the more commonly used term soubrette. It's worth noting that 38 of the 89 French trouser roles in the database are marked unspecified because only the original singer's name is given. However, many of these singers held the position of Dugazon within their opera company. For example, Lisa Totin, who created 4 of the roles in the database, was a deuxième then première Dugazon at the Grand Theatre de Lyon, before becoming star singer at Offenbach's Theatre de Boeuf. It's important to recognise that Dugazon describes not so much a singer's vocal properties as their character type. The most skilled singers would occupy the chanteuse position, and these roles often required virtuosic coloratura capabilities. Dugazon parts, however, required excellent theatrical and comedic skills, but not the vocal development required for either coloratura or declamatory singing. Your position within the theatre and your voice type were separate entities. This is shown by Gounod's designation of both Isabelle in voice and Mazette in La Colombe as simply soprano in the score. However, the creator, Amélie Fèvre, her official position at the Théâtre Lyrique was Principal Dugazon. By the 20th century, the Dugazon was so established at the voice of the pageboy that Strauss's intentional departure from it in Der Rosenkavalier constituted, as one reviewer put it, a bold experiment on the part of Strauss, which will cause not a little perplexity to managers. It's important to note that this review reveals a problem with the semantics of the term mezzo-soprano. While the modern Fox system totally separates mezzo-soprano and soprano voices, grouping mezzos and contraltos as the lower female voices, historically the term has been inconsistent, at times being simply a subdivision of soprano. As composers began exploiting the altissimo register of soprano voices in the first decades of the 19th century, the term mezzo gained prominence, in many cases simply meaning a soprano role without the need for crazy high notes. The concept of the mezzo-soprano as a third voice type, lying intermediate to the soprano and contralto in both range and colour, is a relatively new concept, and it's further complicated by the ever-increasing rarity of contraltos. Occasionally, the term means, as the translation would suggest, a middle soprano, i.e. a soprano with a warmer, stronger middle register and a richer timbre than that of a light soprano, with perhaps more limited access to high notes and less natural agility. Singers now classed as lyric, spinto and dramatic sopranos would, under this definition, be mezzo-sopranos. In the case of Octavian, mezzo-soprano definitely refers to a robust soprano rather than an alto with high notes. Von Hofmannsthal, the librettist, wrote to Richard Rickard in 1906 about the libretto, describing a graceful girl dressed up as a man, a la Geraldine Farrar or Mary Garden, both of whom were lyric sopranos. Moreover, Eva von der Osten, seen here as Brunhilde, was a noted Wagnerian soprano, with extant recordings of von Osten available, confirming her characteristically silvery tone. In terms of colour and capabilities, Strauss's trouser roles seem to be interchangeable with his heroines. Lotte Lehmann confirmed this by creating the role of der Komponist in Ariadne of Naxos in Stuttgart, before singing the title role at the Metropolitan Opera premiere. Recordings of Lehmann singing Turandot, Isolde, Costanza leave little doubt of her being a true soprano. The idea of a dramatic soprano undertaking a trouser role is totally contrary to modern casting expectations in opera. Richard Baldry asserts that trouser roles can be found among all the female voice categories except the dramatic soprano. That Baldry's book is peer-reviewed and published by the Music Teachers National Association shows how deeply entrenched these misconceptions are. Like Strauss, Massenet also requires a more robust soprano when promoting the pageboy from sidekick to lead role. Le Prince-Charmant in Cendrillon, or Cinderella, is a soprano falcon or soprano de sentiment, where Cendrillon is simply a soprano. The falcon is a French voice classification named after Cornélie Falcon, whose voice in modern terms might be thought of as a dramatic soprano. Massenet's orchestration for Le Prince-Charmant requires greater vocal power than that which the standard Dugazon could provide. Similarly, Massenet's eponymous Cherubin, inspired by Cherubino, is specifically a soprano lyrique, indicating a fuller timbre than that of the typical Dugazon. The role was created by Mary Garden, mentioned earlier in this presentation as one of the inspirations for Octavian. Much like their pageboy progenitors, Strauss and Massenet's turn-of-the-century lead roles, written originally for robustly voiced sopranos, are now almost exclusively sung by lyric mezzos. This reveals two problems with the lyric mezzo Fach category. For one, if so many of the Fach's canonic roles, Isabel, Stefano, Cherubino, were actually written for light soprano voices, is the lyric mezzo really just a soubrette in disguise? Tessitura and timbre are often given as the yardsticks differentiating the lyric mezzo from her soubrette colleagues. However, as Sandra Cotton demonstrates, the tessitura of pageboy roles is often just as high as any other soubrette part. Moreover, many lyric mezzo parts were still considered soprano roles until a few decades ago, undermining the assertion that the distinction is based on the actual vocal content of these roles. Moreover, this timbral difference is extremely dubious, given how many Fach guidebooks describe the lyric mezzo as sounding almost like a soprano, an equivalent in tonal and timbral quality to light lyric sopranos. Given how much they sound like sopranos, the oft-repeated accusations that lyric mezzos are simply short sopranos without the high notes to take lead roles is very difficult to refute. This was certainly the opinion of Maria Callas, who rather savagely but succinctly put it, nowadays if a soprano does not have her high notes, she's a mezzo. Even if this apparent timbral difference does exist, wherein the lyric mezzo is darker, richer voice than that of a true soubrette, this would, to my mind, make her less appropriate casting for the eternally optimistic pageboy. The second problem with the lyric mezzo fach is, as a grouping, the vocal requirements for Strauss and Massenet are a world away from the acting-centred chirping of a standard Dugazon Pageboy. Since the entire purpose of the Fox system is to have singers sing repertoire that they are best suited to, the lumping together of roles with so little in common vocally does not make sense. Complicating this matter is the fact that Italian Baroque and bel canto roles, the majority of which are written for contralto voice, also appear in the lyric mezzo category. Heroic travesti roles are written largely for virtuosic contraltos, often requiring baritonal low notes for the roles to keep their dramatic impetus. Dramatically, they're heroic, virtuous, strong, and taken seriously by other characters. Dugazon Pageboys are for light, bright voices. There's no real vocal virtuosity demanded by these roles, but comic acting skills and the ability to charm an audience are indispensable. Massenet and Strauss's turn-of-the-century roles are written for dramatic soprano, requiring soaring top notes as well as a developed middle register that's able to cut through heavy orchestration. As leads, they sing for much longer than a sidekick Dugazon might, and are much more psychologically complex. They're not stock characters anymore. The lyric mezzo is therefore primed for an identity crisis, given that inevitably she will be badly suited to something in her fach. Vocally, these roles are completely disparate. Their only unifying feature is that the singer is in trousers. Proponents of the fach system seem blinded by the outwards appearance of travesti, failing to recognise the enormous difference in the vocal and dramatic arc of these characters. The precedence of having the travesti look over being vocally appropriate for these roles is evidenced in that many fach guidebooks make a specific reference to the aspiring lyric mezzo's appearance, emphasising the need for a slender figure and to look good in pants. Top-level singers like Sarah Connolly, Alice Coote and Tara Rock have all testified that they employ a different physicality for pants roles versus female roles, but do not draw the distinction in the physicality employed for hero versus pages. To look on these roles as simply male misses that a 15-year-old probably has a different physicality than a military general. Moreover, it ignores the fact that audiences are not expected to believe that the page is male, hence the abundance of girl dressed as boy dressed as girl plot lines, as well as the page commonly appearing in female-only spaces without it reading as creepy. Examining the history of these roles can prove useful in building appreciation that the page boy and heroic travesti are two separate traditions. While these histories are often presented in pop culture as one and the same, there are several key roles which challenge this. The best known history is that of the heroic travesti tradition. In short, castrati were the star singers of the Baroque, with women taking the lead male roles when a suitable castrato was either unavailable or too expensive. Women would often sing the second man or musicetto role. It's worth noting that although the castrati did reach level of stardom unrivaled by any other voice type, many on-travesti singers were stars in their own right, with Handel in particular writing works for many singers who specialised in on-travesti performance. It's not accurate to say, therefore, that the travesti replaced the castrato. They coexisted with them. Changes in operatic audiences' taste towards the start of the 19th century caused the popularity of castrati to dwindle. Given the precedent for a treble voice in the lead male role of opera seria, the travesti became the default casting. Here we see Pasta in the role of Tancredi. Innovations in vocal training allowed tenors to pull the vocal weight of their middle voice into their highest register, which hitherto they would have sung in falsetto, producing a sound of great power and dramatic urgency. Audiences and composers loved the sound, and the tenor eventually supplanted the travesti as leading man of opera seria. As Naomi Andre puts it, no longer the hero and relegated to the secondary status of the page boy travesti role, women's voices gradually lost access to their former characterisation of men with power. One glaring issue created in thinking that this history belongs to French travesti roles as well as Italian is that the castrati and subsequently heroic travesti roles were not a feature of French opera. The only travesti character in the French Baroque is L'amour, or Cupid, and you can see a few examples there from Rameau operas in the 1700s in blue. The process of creating a castrati offended French sensibilities and prevented the establishment of castrati on the operatic stage. Since the operatic pageboy is principally found in French repertoire, it's a dubious assertion to say that the heroic travesti was a forerunner to the pageboy in French opera. I would posit that the inclusion of pages in Italian opera was inspired by the pre-existing French archetype. Additionally, placing the origin of the operatic pageboy as a consequence of the tenore di forza's rise is problematic in that it means that several roles would be historical anachronisms. Dupré, the first kind of tenore di forza, who sang his famous Top C in William Tell in 1829, began the arms race for top notes among tenors. However, there are several examples of page boys such as Cherubino or Olivier, and also Isolier, who preceded this note, and actually Cherubino and Olivier preceded the downfall of the castrati, never mind the tenore di forza. So, where did the page boy come from? Well, it was probably from straight theatre. Female cross-dressing remained immensely popular in French theatre at the close of the 18th century, in spite of bifurcated gender roles established by the Enlightenment. Throughout the 19th century, the practice flourished in the satires and farces of French boulevard theatre, and occasionally trickled up to the more venerable opera, opera comique, and théâtre lyrique, where recent changes in operatic subject matters from hero of antiquity to the aristocracy provided theatrical rationale for the existence of pages. There are several examples of a direct transition from straight theatre to opera. The casting of Cherubino, for example, was undoubtedly influenced by the playwright Beaumarchais' instructions that Cherubin was to be played by a young and very pretty woman. Mozart's music gained popularity in France at both the Paris Opera and the Théâtre Italien in the first decades of the 19th century. It's plausible, therefore, that Mozart's Cherubino may have influenced French composers by legitimising the use of trouser roles in more prestigious works than the light and rather lowbrow musical fare with which the roles were principally associated. The pageboy's popularity exploded in the 19th century. However, by the Belle Epoque, just about 1870 there, anxieties around feminism and masculine women with strong sexual urges and a desire to undo men mounted. These anxieties are reflected in late 19th century operas like Carmen and Samson and Delilah. It was therefore no longer cute to have a woman dressed as a man declaring her fervent sexual desires. It was subversive and it was dangerous, and so it was eradicated in France. Trouser roles where women played children were still written in Germany, but the page was not revived until such operas as Der Rosenkavalier and Cherubin, which were love letters to the earlier opera buffa tradition. Written at the dawn of psychosexuality studies, these roles are notably far more risque than any page before. Understanding that the pageboy and heroic travesty have separate lineages is crucial to dissolving this trouser role monolith. The ability to contextualise individual roles within wider operatic trends is essential in understanding the dramatic arc of these characters and portraying them effectively. To focus solely on these roles' gender is to completely miss the significance of time period, genre, theatrical precedent, and importantly, how the composer and librettist intended that audiences receive these roles. To view these roles as one and the same vocally is to obliterate their effectiveness musically. Thank you for your time. I'll now take any questions.